Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova and looked at the dead planet below them. The world called Kepler 442b had no life on it now, but the scanners showed something strange under the ground. His ship was not big like the warships, but it was good for finding old things on planets that nobody cared about anymore. "Captain, we are getting some very old readings from the north side of the planet," said Alex Stone, who worked with the communication systems. Alex was young, but he was very good at finding patterns in data that other people missed. The readings look like they come from buildings that are really, really old. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her workstation where she had been studying the planet for 3 days now. Lisa was the best person they had for understanding old alien languages and history. She had spent years learning about all the different races in the galaxy and how they built their cities and ships. "Jake, these readings are older than anything we have found before. If I am right about this, then whatever is down there was built before the Vorthak Empire even started, and they have been around for over 100,000 years. Jake nodded and made his choice. The Terra Nova was sent out here to look for old ruins and artifacts that might help humans understand more about the galaxy. For over 200 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Council, but they were always treated like the new kids who did not know much about anything important. The big alien races like the crystal people called Vorthak and the energy beings called Zephyrians always acted like humans were not smart enough to matter. "Commander Brooks, get your team ready," Jake said to his second-in-command. Ryan Brooks was a military man who had fought in the border wars with some of the smaller alien groups. He knew how to keep people safe when they went to places that might be dangerous. "We're going down to take a look at whatever is under that rock." The shuttle landed on the surface of Kepler 442b with a soft bump. The air was thin, but they could breathe it with their masks on. Jake led his team across the rocky ground toward where their scanners said the old buildings were hiding. Lisa carried her tools for studying old writing, and Ryan had his weapons ready just in case they found something that did not want visitors. When they found the entrance, it was almost hidden under thousands of years of dust and fallen rocks. The door was made of some kind of metal that their scanners could not identify. It had symbols carved into it that Lisa had never seen before, but something about them seemed familiar to her in a way she could not explain. "These symbols are not like anything in our databases," Lisa said as she ran her hands over the carved metal. "But look at this pattern here and this one over there. They follow rules that seem almost like they could be related to very old human languages, but that does not make any sense because humans only went to space about 400 years ago." Alex was scanning the door with his equipment when something strange happened. The symbols began to glow with a soft blue light and the door started to move. It slid open without making any sound and revealed a long tunnel that went down into the planet. "Well, that is new," Ryan said as he checked his weapon. "Usually old alien doors do not just open for us like we are welcome guests." They walked down the tunnel for what felt like hours. The walls were smooth and covered with more of the strange symbols that seemed to glow when Lisa got close to them. Finally, they came to a huge room filled with things that looked like computers, but were built in ways that human technology could not copy. In the center of the room was a large crystal that pulsed with light. When Lisa approached it, the crystal began to project images in the air above it. The images showed star maps and battles and ships that were bigger than anything the current galaxy had ever built. "My God," Lisa whispered as she watched the images change and flow. "These are records of some kind of war that happened long ago. Look at those ships, Jake. They are massive and the technology looks more advanced than anything the Vorthak or Zephyrians have now." The images showed a species that looked almost human, fighting against something dark and terrible. The enemy moved like a black cloud across star systems and left nothing alive behind it. The human-like beings fought with weapons that could destroy entire planets and ships that could move faster than anything should be able to move. "Lisa, are you sure those beings in the images look human?" Jake asked as he studied the projections carefully. "Because if they do, then we have a very big problem with everything we thought we knew about human history." Lisa was working with her translation equipment, trying to understand the symbols that appeared with the images. After an hour of work, she looked up at Jake with fear in her eyes. "Jake, I have been able to translate some of this, and you are not going to believe what it says. According to these records, the species fighting in this war called themselves the Builders, and they used a language that is definitely an early form of human speech." Alex had been quiet while he studied the technology around them, but now he spoke up. Captain, I have been scanning these computers and they are trying to connect to something. It is like they are sending a signal to other places, but I cannot tell where the signal is going. Ryan was checking the other parts of the room when he found something that made everyone stop what they were doing. Jake, you need to see this right now, he called from near the back wall. There is another door here and it has a handprint scanner, but the handprint is human-sized. They all stared at the scanner that was clearly designed for a human hand. Lisa put her hand on the scanner and it immediately glowed green. Another door opened and revealed a smaller room with even more advanced technology. This is impossible, Lisa said as she looked at writings on the wall that were clearly in an ancient form of human language. According to what I can read here, the builders were not just related to humans, they were our ancestors. These records say that 50,000 years ago, humans had an empire that covered most of the galaxy. Jake felt like the floor was falling away under his feet. If this was true, then everything they had been told about human history was wrong. Humans were not newcomers to the galaxy. They were the descendants of one of the most powerful civilizations that had ever existed. Lisa, can you find out what happened to them? Jake asked. If humans used to be this powerful, then why did we end up starting over on Earth with no memory of any of this? Lisa continued working with the translation systems, while Alex tried to understand the technology around them. After several more hours, Lisa found records that made her face go pale. Jake, according to these records, our ancestors fought a war against something they called the Swarm. The Swarm was some kind of collective intelligence that consumed entire worlds and grew stronger. With each planet it destroyed. The war lasted for thousands of years and the humans were losing. She paused and looked at more of the records before continuing. The final records talk about something called a great sacrifice that would save the galaxy, but would cost the builders everything they had built. The records end there, but they mention other sites like this one hidden across the galaxy that contain more information. Jake realized that finding this place was just the beginning. If there were other sites with more records, then they needed to find them and learn the truth about what had happened to their ancestors and why humanity had been forced to start over. As they prepared to leave the ruins, Jake noticed that Alex had been very quiet. When he asked what was wrong, Alex said something that worried everyone. Captain, ever since we got here, I have been having strange dreams about flying ships and fighting in battles that I have never seen before. It is like something in this place is waking up memories that are not mine. The news about what they found on Kepler 442b spread through the human colonies faster than Jake Morrison had hoped it would. Within 2 weeks, every major news network was talking about the discovery and asking if humans really used to rule the galaxy thousands of years ago. The Galactic Council was not happy about all the attention, and they made it clear that they thought the whole thing was just humans, trying to make themselves seem more important than they really were. Admiral Kate Harrison called Jake to her office, on Earth 3 days after his report reached the military command. Kate was a tough woman who had fought in several wars and earned the respect of even the alien members of the Galactic Council. She did not believe in wild stories, but she also did not ignore evidence when it was put in front of her. Captain Morrison, I have read your report 3 times and I have had our best scientist look at the data you brought back, Kate said as she sat behind her desk. Dr. Ben Clark has been working day and night trying to understand the technology you found, and he says it is beyond anything we currently know how to build. Jake nodded and waited for her to continue. He knew that what they had found would change everything, but he also knew that powerful people did not like it when their view of the world got turned upside down. The problem, Jake, is that the Galactic Council thinks we are making all of this up to try to get more power in the government. The Vorthak Emperor Zix Thala has been telling everyone that humans are known for creating stories about themselves, and that we should not be trusted with important decisions. Dr. Lisa Carter had been working with the translation team for weeks, trying to decode more of the ancient records. She had found references to other sites scattered across the galaxy, and she was sure that they contained more information about what had happened to their ancestors. The problem was that getting to those sites would require ships and resources that the human government might not want to provide if the Galactic Council was against the whole project. Admiral, we need to investigate the other sites that are mentioned in the records, Lisa said during the meeting. I have found star charts that show the locations of 47 different installations, and some of them appear to be much larger than what we found on Kepler 442b. Senator Paul Kennedy, was also at the meeting, and he was not convinced that spending money and ships on this project was a good idea. Paul was the kind of politician who worried more about keeping other governments happy than about finding out the truth about human history. Dr. Carter, even if these sites exist, and even if they contain more information about ancient humans, we have to think about the political situation, Paul said. If we keep pushing this investigation, the Galactic Council might decide that humans are becoming too independent, and they could make life very difficult for our colonies. Jake felt angry when he heard this, but he kept his voice calm. Senator, with all due respect, we are talking about discovering the true history of our species. If there is even a chance that humans used to be a major galactic power, then we need to know what happened and why we lost that knowledge. Admiral Harrison made the decision that would change everything. Captain Morrison, I am authorizing a classified mission to investigate 3 of the sites that Dr. Carter has identified. You will take the Terra Nova and a small support team, but you will not report your findings to the Galactic Council until we know more about what we are dealing with. The first site they visited was in a system that was supposed to be empty according to all the galactic charts. When they arrived, they found a space station that was hidden behind a field that made it invisible to most sensors. The station was huge, and it was still partially powered after 50,000 years. Alex Stone was the first one to notice that something was different about this place. As soon as they docked with the station, he started having the same kind of dreams he had experienced on Kepler 442b, but they were much stronger now. In the dreams, he could see himself working on ships that looked like the ones in the ancient records, and he could remember fighting battles against an enemy that moved like living shadow. Captain, something is happening to me, Alex said as they explored the station. It is like the technology here is connecting to something in my brain and showing me memories that belong to someone else. Dr. Carter was fascinated by what they found on the station. There were massive computers that contained star charts showing the locations of hundreds of worlds that had been part of the ancient human empire. There were also records of technologies that made current human science look like children playing with toys. Jake, look at this, Lisa called from one of the computer terminals. These records talk about something called quantum empathy, which allowed humans to communicate instantly across the entire galaxy. They also developed ways to transfer consciousness between bodies and weapons that could manipulate space and time itself. Commander Ryan Brooks was more interested in the military information they were finding. The ancient humans had built ships that were kilometers long and carried weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Their soldiers used armor that made them almost impossible to kill, and they could coordinate battles across multiple star systems at the same time. Captain, if even half of what these records say is true, then our ancestors were the most powerful military force the galaxy has ever seen, Ryan said. The question is, what could have been strong enough to defeat them? The answer came when they found the central archive of the station. The records there told the story of an enemy that came from outside the galaxy and consumed everything it touched. The swarm was not just one species, but a collection of machines and corrupted organic matter that grew stronger by absorbing the life force and technology of the worlds it conquered. According to these records, the war against the swarm lasted for over 5,000 years, Lisa said as she translated the ancient texts. The humans threw everything they had at it, but the swarm just kept getting stronger. Every time they destroyed part of it, the swarm would learn from the attack and become resistant to that type of weapon. Alex was connected to one of the ancient computers when something unexpected happened. The computer began downloading information directly into his brain, and he started speaking in the ancient human language that Lisa had been struggling to translate. For several minutes, he spoke as if he was someone else entirely, and then he collapsed. When Alex woke up, he looked at the others with eyes that seemed much older than his 25 years. I remember now, he said quietly. Not everything, but enough to know that we are in terrible danger. The swarm is not dead, it is sleeping, and when humans start using the ancient technology again, it will wake up. The team found more evidence of this on the second site they visited. This installation was built inside an asteroid, and it contained weapons and ships that were ready for war. But it also contained a warning system that had been monitoring the galaxy for signs that the swarm might return. Dr. Carter discovered that the warning system had been sending signals to other hidden sites across the galaxy. and many of those sites had started powering up their systems. Jake, it looks like our investigation has triggered some kind of automatic response. Sites that have been dormant for 50,000 years are coming back online. On the third site they visited, Alex experienced something that changed him completely. This site was different from the others because it contained what appeared to be an artificial intelligence that had been waiting for humans to return. When Alex connected to the system, the AI began talking to him directly. "You are the children of the builders," the AI said through Alex. "We have waited so long for your return, but you have come back too soon. The great sacrifice created a lock that keeps the swarm sleeping, but that lock is breaking because you are rediscovering your heritage." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What was the great sacrifice?" he asked. The AI answered through Alex, but its voice was filled with sadness. "The builders gave up everything they had built and everything they were to create a quantum lock around the swarm. They wiped their own memories and scattered their descendants across the galaxy so that the knowledge of how to break the lock would be lost. But knowledge wants to be found, and now that you have started looking for the truth, the lock is weakening." Lisa understood what this meant, and it terrified her. "You are saying that by investigating our own history, we are accidentally waking up the thing that destroyed our ancestors." The AI confirmed her fears. "The swarm feeds on advanced technology and organized consciousness. As long as humans remained primitive and scattered, it stayed asleep. But now that you are remembering who you used to be and rebuilding your technology, the swarm senses that its food source is returning." Commander Brooks asked the question that everyone was thinking. "How long do we have before it wakes up completely?" Alex looked at them with the ancient AI speaking through him. "The deep space monitoring stations have already detected movement at the edge of the galaxy where the swarm was locked away. You have perhaps 2 years before it reaches the first inhabited systems and begins feeding again. Unless you can find a way to repair the lock or discover a new way to stop it, the galaxy will burn just like it did 50,000 years ago." Jake realized that their discovery had put every living thing in the galaxy in danger. The first sign that the swarm was waking up came from the deep space monitoring stations at the edge of the galaxy. General Steve Parker was in his office on Mars when the report started coming in about massive energy signatures moving toward inhabited space. Steve had been a soldier for 30 years, and he had fought against pirates and rebel colonies, but nothing had prepared him for what the sensors were showing him. "Sir, the energy readings are off all our charts," reported Lieutenant Troy Adams, who was monitoring the communications from the outer stations. "Whatever is moving out there is bigger than our largest battleships, and there are hundreds of them." Jake Morrison had returned to Earth to brief the military leadership about what his team had discovered. The news that humanity's ancestors had once ruled the galaxy was shocking enough, but learning that their investigation had awakened an ancient enemy made everything much more serious. Admiral Kate Harrison called an emergency meeting with all the top military commanders and scientists. Dr. Ben Clark had been working around the clock trying to understand the ancient technology that Jake's team had brought back, and his findings were both amazing and terrifying. "The technology we have recovered is thousands of years ahead of anything we currently use," Ben explained to the group. "These weapons and ship designs could make our current fleet look like toys, but the problem is that we do not understand how to build or maintain most of it." Dr. Lisa Carter had been working with teams of linguists and historians, trying to decode more of the ancient records. What she had learned about the first war against the swarm made her afraid for everyone in the galaxy. According to the records, the swarm is not just one enemy, but a collective consciousness made up of both machines and corrupted organic matter, Lisa told the meeting. "It spreads by consuming entire planets and absorbing their technology and life force into itself. Every world it destroys makes it stronger and smarter." Alex Stone had been changed by his experiences connecting with the ancient AI systems. The strange dreams had become constant visions, and sometimes he would speak in the ancient human language without realizing it. Dr. Amy Foster had been studying what was happening to him, and her findings worried everyone. "Alex's brain is being restructured by exposure to the ancient technology," Amy explained. "His genetic code contains dormant sequences that are being activated, and this is allowing him to interface directly with systems that were built 50,000 years ago. The first attack came sooner than anyone expected. The colony world of New Geneva was on the outer edge of human space, and it was the first target the swarm chose when it began moving into inhabited systems. The attack happened so fast that the colonists barely had time to send a distress signal before all communication was cut off. Captain Troy Adams was leading a patrol squadron near New Geneva when the swarm arrived. What he saw there would give him nightmares for the rest of his life. The swarm ships looked like they were made of living shadow and metal that moved like liquid. They surrounded the planet and began draining its energy, while mechanical tendrils reached down to the surface to harvest everything that lived there. "Base, this is Captain Adams." Troy reported back to military headquarters. "New Geneva is under attack by unknown forces that match nothing in our databases. The attackers are not responding to any communication, and they appear to be consuming the entire planet." Troy tried to attack the swarm ships with his squadron, but their weapons had no effect at all. The energy beams from his ships were absorbed by the enemy vessels and seemed to make them stronger. When he fired missiles at them, the swarm ships grew new appendages that caught the missiles and incorporated them into their own structure. The planet of New Geneva was completely stripped of all life within 6 hours. When the swarm was finished, there was nothing left but a dead rock floating in space. The enemy fleet then began moving toward the next inhabited system. News of the attack spread through the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. The Galactic Council, which had been dismissing human claims about ancient history, suddenly realized that something terrible was happening. Emperor Zixathala of the Vorthak Empire demanded an emergency session to discuss the threat. "The humans have awakened something that threatens all of us," Zixathala announced to the council. "Their reckless investigation of ancient ruins has brought this enemy to our galaxy, and now we all must pay the price for their curiosity." Jake Morrison was at the council meeting representing humanity, and he felt the anger and fear from all the alien representatives. But he also knew that blaming humans would not help anyone survive what was coming. "Emperor Zixathala, with respect, the swarm was already in this galaxy," Jake replied. "It was locked away by our ancestors 50,000 years ago, and it would have eventually broken free on its own. At least now we have some warning and some knowledge about how to fight it." The Zephyrian representative, who was made of pure energy, flickered with what looked like anger. "Knowledge that has already proven useless," it said. "Your people attacked the enemy with conventional weapons and achieved nothing. If your ancestors, who were supposedly so powerful, could not defeat this swarm permanently, how do you expect us to survive?" Dr. Lisa Carter had been studying the ancient records frantically, looking for any information about how the builders had fought the swarm. What she found gave her both hope and terror. The ancient humans did find a way to stop the swarm, but it required a sacrifice that destroyed their entire civilization. Lisa explained to Jake and the other human leaders. They discovered that the swarm could be contained by something they called a quantum lock, but creating the lock required every human to give up their advanced technology and their memories of how to use it. Alex Stone was becoming more connected to the ancient systems every day, and through him they learned more about what their ancestors had done. The quantum lock was not just a prison for the swarm, it was a transformation that changed the enemy from a destroyer into something that could create instead of consume. The builders discovered that the swarm was originally created by a species that wanted to spread life throughout the galaxy, Alex said while connected to an ancient AI. But something went wrong, and instead of creating life, the swarm began consuming it. The quantum lock was designed to reverse that corruption and return the swarm to its original purpose. General Steve Parker was trying to organize a defense against the advancing enemy, but conventional weapons were proving to be worse than useless. Every attack on the swarm just made it stronger and gave it new abilities to use against them. "We need to start using the ancient human technology," Steve argued during a strategy meeting. "It is our only hope of slowing them down long enough to find a permanent solution." Dr. Ben Clark had been working with teams of engineers to reverse engineer some of the simpler ancient devices they had recovered. The first breakthrough came when they managed to create a working copy of an ancient human shield generator. "The shield technology works by manipulating space-time itself," Ben explained. "Instead of absorbing energy like conventional shields, these create a bubble where physics works differently. Energy weapons and even matter cannot penetrate them." The first test of the new shield technology came when the swarm attacked the industrial world of Titan Base. Captain Troy Adams was there, with a squadron of ships equipped with the experimental shields, and for the first time human forces were able to fight back. Effectively, the shields are working. Troy reported during the battle. The swarm weapons are not getting through, and our conventional weapons are having some effect when we fire from behind the shield barriers. But the victory was temporary. The swarm quickly adapted to the new technology, and within hours it had developed new types of weapons that could penetrate the ancient shields. Even worse, the enemy began copying the shield technology for its own use. Jake Morrison realized that they were fighting a losing battle. Every piece of technology they used against the swarm was eventually turned against them. The enemy was learning and growing stronger with every encounter. We cannot win this war by fighting. Jake told Admiral Harrison, "The swarm absorbs everything we throw at it and becomes more powerful. We need to find another way to stop it, or we will all end up like New Geneva." Alex Stone was spending more time connected to the ancient AI systems and less time in normal human consciousness. Through these connections, he began to understand what the original quantum lock had really been, and why it had required such a terrible sacrifice. The lock was not just about containing the swarm, Alex explained to the others. It required humans to link their consciousness together across the entire galaxy and use their combined will to restructure reality itself. But doing that meant giving up their individual identities and their advanced civilization. Dr. Amy Foster had been studying other humans who had been exposed to the ancient technology, and she discovered that Alex was not the only one being changed. Across all the human colonies, people were beginning to experience strange dreams and visions, similar to what Alex had been going through. The ancient genetic sequences are awakening in humans everywhere, Amy reported. It appears that exposure to the swarm itself is triggering the dormant abilities that our ancestors had. We are becoming something more than human, but we do not yet understand what that means. Dr. Lisa Carter had been working day and night for 3 weeks trying to decode the final records from the ancient archives. What she discovered in those records would change everything they thought they knew about stopping the swarm. The ancient humans had called their last desperate plan the Unity Protocol, and it was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. "Jake, you need to see this immediately." Lisa called to Captain Morrison, who was in another part of the research facility. "I have found the complete instructions for the Unity Protocol, and it is not just about linking human consciousness together. It requires something much more difficult and risky." Jake looked at the translated records that Lisa had spread across her desk. The ancient language had been fully decoded now, and the instructions were clear but terrifying. The Unity Protocol required every human in the galaxy to temporarily merge their consciousness with the ancient AI systems and use their combined mental power to rewrite the basic programming of the swarm itself. Lisa, this says, that humans have to give up their individual minds and become part of a collective intelligence, Jake said as he read through the documents. How is that different from what the swarm does when it consumes people? Dr. Frank Lopez had joined the research team after news of the Unity Protocol spread through the scientific community. Frank was an expert in consciousness research, and he had been studying how human minds could be linked together without losing their individual identity. "The difference is that the Unity Protocol is temporary and voluntary," Frank explained. "The ancient records describe it as humans choosing to become one mind for a specific purpose, and then returning to their individual selves afterward. But the process is extremely dangerous because not everyone who enters the collective consciousness is guaranteed to come back out as themselves." Alex Stone had become the primary interface between the modern humans and the ancient AI systems. His transformation was nearly complete now, and sometimes it was difficult to tell whether Alex or the ancient intelligence was speaking. When he talked about the old war, the Unity Protocol worked before, but it required the participation of every human in the galaxy, Alex said while connected to the ancient computers. That meant billions of people all agreeing to risk their individual identity for the chance to save everyone else. The question is whether modern humans have the same courage and unity that our ancestors had. General Steve Parker had been working with Colonel Nina Walsh to train special forces teams in the use of ancient human technology. The weapons and ships they had managed to reconstruct were incredibly powerful, but they required operators who could interface directly with AI systems using their modified genetics. "Colonel Walsh, how many people do we have who can successfully operate the ancient equipment?" Steve asked during one of their strategy meetings. Nina had been testing human volunteers for weeks, and the results were both encouraging and worrying. "Sir, we have found that about 30% of humans carry the genetic markers that allow them to connect with the ancient technology. But using the systems changes them in ways we do not fully understand yet." Captain Helen Carter, who was Lisa Carter's sister, had been put in command of the rebuilt human fleet. The ancient ship designs were unlike anything modern humans had ever built, and they required crews who could think and act as a collective unit rather than as individuals following orders. "The ships are responding well to crew members who have undergone the genetic activation process," Helen reported to Admiral Harrison. "But the crews are starting to think and act differently. They are more coordinated, but they are also becoming less human in some ways." The swarm had destroyed 12 more worlds while the humans were preparing their defense. Each attack was faster and more efficient than the last as the enemy learned from every encounter. The alien members of the Galactic Council were becoming desperate, and some were beginning to blame humanity for bringing this disaster to the galaxy. "The Vorthak Empire is withdrawing its forces to defend only their core worlds," Admiral Kate Harrison informed Jake during an emergency meeting. "Emperor Zixthala has decided that fighting the swarm is hopeless, and he wants to preserve what he can of his civilization." The Zephyrian Collective had tried to fight the swarm using their energy manipulation abilities, but they discovered that the enemy could absorb and redirect their power just as easily as it absorbed conventional weapons. 3 of their major energy nodes had been consumed, and the surviving Zephyrians were retreating to the galactic center. Jake Morrison realized that humanity was going to face the swarm alone, just as their ancestors had 50,000 years ago. The other species in the galaxy were too afraid or too proud to work together on the Unity Protocol, even though it was their only hope for survival. "We are going to have to do this ourselves," Jake told the assembled human leaders. "The other species do not trust us enough to participate in the Unity Protocol, and without their help, we will need every human in the galaxy to volunteer." Dr. Amy Foster had been studying the genetic changes that were happening to humans who were exposed to the ancient technology. What she discovered gave her hope that the Unity Protocol might actually work with modern humans. "The genetic activation is not just allowing people to use ancient technology," Amy explained to the group. "It is awakening abilities that all humans carry in their DNA. The capacity for quantum empathy and collective consciousness is part of what makes us human. We just forgot how to use it." Colonel Nina Walsh had been training the first volunteers for the Unity Protocol on a small scale. The tests involved linking the consciousness of 10 or 12 people together for short periods and using their combined mental power to manipulate simple quantum fields. "The small-scale tests are working," Nina reported. "When people link their minds together, they can accomplish things that none of them could do alone. But some of the volunteers are having trouble returning to normal individual consciousness after the link is broken." Alex Stone had been experiencing the collective consciousness state for weeks now, and he served as a guide for the other volunteers. Through him, they learned what it felt like to be part of something larger than themselves while still maintaining their individual identity. "It is like being a drop of water that becomes part of the ocean but still remembers being a drop," Alex tried to explain to the others. "You do not lose yourself, you just become more than yourself for a while." The final test of the Unity Protocol came when the swarm attacked the research facility where the human teams had been preparing. Instead of evacuating, the scientists and volunteers decided to try the protocol on a larger scale to defend their base. 200 humans linked their consciousness together and focused their combined mental power on the attacking swarm ships. For the first time since the war began, human forces were able to do more than just slow down the enemy. The linked humans actually began to reprogram the swarm ships and turn them against each other. "It worked," Dr. Frank Lopez reported after the test. "The Unity Protocol allowed us to reach into the swarm's collective consciousness and change its programming. We turned 3 of their ships into defenders instead of attackers, but the success came with a terrible cost. 37 of the 200 volunteers did not return from the collective consciousness state. Their bodies remained alive, but their individual minds were lost somewhere in the quantum field that connected all thinking beings." Jake Morrison looked at the volunteers who had been lost and realized what the ancient humans had faced when they made their great sacrifice. The Unity Protocol could save the galaxy, but it would cost humanity some of its people and possibly its entire way of life. We know the protocol works now, Jake said to the assembled leaders, but we also know the price we might have to pay. The question is whether we have the right to ask every human in the galaxy to risk their individual identity for the chance to save everyone. Senator Paul Kennedy, who had opposed the investigation from the beginning, now found himself supporting the Unity Protocol. Captain Morrison, if we do nothing, the swarm will consume every living thing in the galaxy, including all of humanity. At least this way we have a chance to save something. Alex Stone had become the primary coordinator for the Unity Protocol preparations. Through his connection to the ancient AI systems, he could monitor human settlements across the galaxy and help coordinate the massive undertaking that would be required. We will need every human colony to participate at exactly the same time, Alex explained. The protocol requires perfect synchronization across the entire galaxy or it will fail. We have perhaps 2 weeks to prepare before the swarm reaches the core worlds and makes the attempt impossible. Dr. Lisa Carter had found references in the ancient records to other species that might have survived similar challenges to the swarm. Jake, there are mentions of other civilizations that faced the swarm in different galaxies. Some of them found ways to transform it without sacrificing their entire species, but we do not have time to contact them and learn their methods. As the swarm continued its advance toward Earth and the other core worlds, humanity prepared for the most difficult decision in their history. The swarm reached the edge of the Sol system on a Tuesday morning, when most of Earth was still sleeping. Captain Jake Morrison was awake in the command center, watching the sensors track hundreds of enemy ships as they moved past Pluto and began their approach toward the inner planets. He knew that this was humanity's last chance to save not just themselves but every living thing in the galaxy. All stations report ready for Unity Protocol activation, announced Alex Stone from his position at the Central Coordination Terminal. Alex was no longer entirely human in the way most people understood the term, but he had retained enough of his original personality to serve as the bridge between individual human consciousness and the collective intelligence that would soon link every person in human space. Dr. Lisa Carter was monitoring the ancient AI systems that would help coordinate the protocol across the galaxy. The artificial intelligences had been waiting for 50,000 years for their creators' children to return and attempt what their ancestors had done before them. Now that the moment had arrived, Lisa could feel the weight of history pressing down on all of them. Jake, we have confirmation from all human colonies and settlements, Lisa reported. Over 50 billion people are prepared to link their consciousness for the Unity Protocol. The ancient systems are ready to guide the process, but they cannot guarantee that everyone who enters the collective state will be able to return as individuals. Admiral Kate Harrison was coordinating the military response from her command ship above Earth. The rebuilt ancient human vessels were holding defensive positions around the most important worlds, but everyone knew that conventional weapons would not stop the swarm. Their only hope was that the Unity Protocol would work before the enemy consumed too many people to make the attempt possible. Captain Morrison, you have authority to initiate the protocol when you judge the moment is right, Kate said through the communication system. The swarm ships are 12 hours from Earth and our defensive forces cannot hold them longer than that, Commander. Ryan Brooks was leading the last conventional attack against the swarm ships as they entered the outer system. His squadron was equipped with the most advanced ancient technology they had been able to reconstruct, but he knew their mission was really just to buy time for the Unity Protocol to activate. All ships concentrate fire on the lead swarm vessels, Ryan ordered his pilots. We cannot stop them, but we can slow them down long enough for our people to save the galaxy. The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever been seen in human space. The ancient human ships fought with weapons that could bend space and time, while the swarm responded with abilities that defied every law of physics that scientists thought they understood. Ships disappeared and reappeared in different locations while energy beams curved through dimensions that should not have existed. Dr. Frank Lopez was monitoring the volunteers who were already beginning to enter the collective consciousness state in preparation for the full protocol activation. What he saw amazed and terrified him, as thousands of individual minds began to merge into something that was greater than the sum of its parts. The preliminary linking is working better than we hoped, Frank reported to Jake. The volunteers are maintaining their individual identity while also becoming part of the collective. It is like they are learning to exist in two states at the same time. Colonel Nina Walsh was leading the military units that would coordinate the physical actions needed during the Unity Protocol. While most humans would be focused on the mental aspects of the process, some would need to remain partially individual to operate the ancient technology and maintain the systems that would channel the collective will. My teams are ready to operate the quantum field generators, Nina announced. When the full protocol activates, we will be able to focus the collective consciousness of 50 billion humans into a beam that can reprogram the swarm at the quantum level. The moment of decision arrived when the swarm began its final approach to Earth. Jake Morrison looked around the command center at the people who had become like family to him during this crisis, and realized that none of them might exist as individuals after the next few hours. All stations initiate the Unity Protocol now, Jake ordered. May whatever we become be worthy of the sacrifice our ancestors made 50,000 years ago. The change began slowly as humans across the galaxy started linking their consciousness through the quantum fields generated by the ancient AI systems. At first, people could still hear their own thoughts and feel their individual emotions, but gradually those personal experiences became part of something much larger and more complex. Alex Stone served as the central focus for the collective consciousness, as 50 billion human minds merged into a single entity that spanned the entire galaxy. For the first time in 50,000 years, humanity became what their ancestors had been at the height of their power, a unified species capable of affecting reality through pure will and determination. The experience was both beautiful and overwhelming. Every human could suddenly feel the thoughts and emotions of every other human, while also accessing memories that stretched back through generations to the original builders who had first fought the swarm. They remembered the glory of the ancient empire and the terrible decision to sacrifice everything to save the galaxy. Through their collective consciousness, humanity reached out to touch the mind of the swarm and found something that surprised them. The enemy was not evil in the way they had expected, but was instead a corrupted version of something that had once been created to help life flourish throughout the galaxy. The swarm had been designed to spread the building blocks of life to dead worlds, but a malfunction had turned it into a consumer instead of a creator. We can fix it, the collective human consciousness realized. The swarm is not our enemy, it is a broken tool that we can repair and use for its original purpose. The process of reprogramming the swarm took every bit of mental power that 50 billion humans could provide. They had to reach into the quantum structure of the enemy's consciousness and carefully reconstruct the programming that had been corrupted millions of years ago when the swarm first began consuming instead of creating. As the Unity Protocol worked its changes, the swarm ships stopped their attack and began to transform. The dark, shadowy vessels became bright and beautiful as their original purpose was restored. Instead of consuming the planets they approached, they began seeding them with the basic materials needed for life to develop and flourish. The transformation of the swarm was only the beginning of what the collective human consciousness accomplished during those few hours, when 50 billion minds worked as one. They repaired damage to ecosystems across the galaxy, restored dead worlds to life, and even brought back some of the species that the swarm had consumed during its long rampage across the stars. But the greatest accomplishment was something that the ancient builders had never achieved. The modern humans found a way to maintain the Unity Protocol without losing their individual identities permanently. Instead of sacrificing their civilization to save the galaxy, they discovered how to exist as both individuals and as part of a collective consciousness at the same time. When the Unity Protocol ended and humans began to return to their normal individual state, they found that they were forever changed by the experience. They could still think and act as separate people, but they also retained a connection to each other that allowed them to coordinate and cooperate in ways that had never been possible before. Jake Morrison opened his eyes in the command center and looked around at his friends and colleagues who were also returning to individual consciousness. They were still themselves, but they were also something more than they had been before the Unity Protocol. "Report," Jake said, though he already knew through his new connection to the others what had happened while they were linked together. "The swarm has been successfully reprogrammed," Lisa Carter announced, though she was smiling because she knew that Jake could feel her joy and relief through their shared connection. It is now fulfilling its original purpose of seeding life throughout the galaxy, instead of consuming it. Alex Stone had returned to being mostly human, but he retained his ability to communicate with the ancient AI systems. Through him, they learned that the artificial intelligences were pleased with what humanity had accomplished and were ready to help them rebuild their civilization with the knowledge and technology of their ancestors. The ancient AIs are offering to teach us everything our ancestors knew, Alex reported. We can have the technology and the knowledge, but we do not have to repeat their mistakes or make the same sacrifices they did. Admiral Kate Harrison was coordinating with the other species in the galaxy, who were amazed by what humanity had accomplished. The Vorthak Empire, and the Zephyrian Collective and all the other civilizations that had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers, now realized that they were dealing with the descendants of the galaxy's greatest civilization. The Galactic Council wants to offer humanity a permanent seat as senior members, Kate told Jake. But they are also afraid of what we might do with our restored knowledge and abilities. Dr. Amy Foster had been studying the humans who had participated in the Unity Protocol, and her findings were remarkable.